Throughout time, every civilization looked back to the past and tried to model themselves or their forefathers. For the Muslims, it was the Umayyad Caliphate. For the Persians, it was the Achaemenid Empire. For Europe, it was the Roman Empire. The Roman Empire was one of, if not the most impactful civilization in history. Without the Romans, the Spaniards would have never colonized the Americas. Without the Romans, the nation of France would have never existed, instead becoming a collection of minor warring tribes. Without the Romans, languages like Italian, French, Portuguese, Spanish, which all came from Latin, would have never existed. And without the Romans, Roman London would have never existed. London, or what the Roman called Londinium, was the capital of Roman Britain during most of the period of Roman rule. Where the name Londinium came from, the name what the Roman gave, remains a mystery. But there are some theories that it came from the names of mythical people. One of these theories of being a pre-Roman king of Britain called King Lud. The second theory that it was named after someone called Lindo. This name comes from the Celtic word wild or fierce. But there are other theories that the name comes more from geography than people, with the theory London was originally called Linden, coming from the Welsh term a lake fort, referencing London being located right next to the Thames. As this is not a video of studying the history of words, instead we'll be looking at what London was like during the Roman period, which lasted for 367 years. London was founded in the year of AD 47, that's 1974 years ago, but there were already settlements around the Thames before the Romans came, and some of these settlements have been dated back to the Bronze Age, more than 3,000 years ago. Roman London was the biggest city Britain would see for over 1,000 years. At its height, around AD 120, Londinium was home to about 45,000 people. It would not reach that size again until the 13th century. Roman London, just like any other Roman cities, it had a public building for the public to use. These include an outdoor circus, a theatre, public baths, a forum. There are still some Roman remains hiding in the city of London today. Like all Roman cities, Roman London had a basilica, originally built in AD 70 and then expanded in AD 90. And London's Roman basilica was a building unlike any other in Britain. It covered nearly 2 hectares of land and standing at a height of 3 stories high. The basilica acted as a civic centre and housed law court, an assembly hall and shrines. At its height, it was also the largest building of its type north of the Alps, showing the importance of London within the Roman Empire. The basilica also formed one side of a forum, a huge open air square that acted as a public meeting place, similar to modern day Times Square in New York, and housed many shops and market stalls. The forum was also a popular place for meeting and partying. Throughout the 2nd and 3rd centuries, many faults were identified with the building, and a series of repairs and modifications were carried out. However, the nail in the coffin did not come until AD 300, when both the basilica and the forum were destroyed by Rome as a punishment for supporting a rogue emperor. Although small portions of the forum may have survived, the majority of the basilica and forum were lost into the annals of history until it was discovered in the 1880s. Today, the remains of the basilica are housed in the basement of a barber shop at the corner of Gracechurch Street and Linden Hall Market. The basilica was an impressive building, which was the heart of Roman London. Today, the Roman basilica, where it once stood, another impressive building took its place, which is the Linden Hall Market. It's funny that the Linden Hall Market is centre for marketplace, meeting, shopping, and it is the heart of modern London, just like the Basilica was for Roman London. Like all cities that are located right next to the river, it must have a bridge, and London was an exception to that rule. Bridges bring people together, allowing them to meet, exchange ideas, and learn. There are 35 bridges over the Thames in London. The first known bridge to be built over the Thames was built by the Romans. It was built in the year of AD 50, but there have been recent finds that suggest the first bridge to be built over the Thames was from the Bronze Age. But there are still more research to be done. The Roman bridge was almost on the site of today's London Bridge, and it's enabled them to join up trade routes from the south with the roads going north. Around AD 50, a timber bridge was built and guarded by a small garrison. On the high dry ground at the northern end of the bridge, a small trade and shipping settlement took root and grew into the town of Londinium. The street that you needed to use to be able to go on the bridge, which allowed you access to London, is called the Stane Street Roman Road. The bridge was on the north bank of the River Thames, surrounded by the wall built by the Romans. The bridge was a remarkable feat. The length of the Roman bridge was longer than today's London Bridge, as the Thames was wider in Roman times than it is today, almost 3 times what it is today, and it was much deeper. The Roman bridge had a drawbridge in the middle, quite useful to let through larger ships. The bridge was 20 feet wide and took 33 years to build. The bridge lasted on and off from AD 43 to AD 410, when the Romans left. Now, some people say the bridge would have fallen into disrepair, and of course timber bridges do fall in disrepair over a while due to rot, rushing water, ice, logs and things going down hitting them. But the Romans were known as great builders, building things to last. For example, the Colosseum, even though it was built 2,000 years ago, it's still standing today. There will have been about 3 bridges. The first one was destroyed by Boudicca, another one that thereafter which may have had a timber bridge, and then the final bridge which went on to the time when the Romans left in about 410 AD. We have no pictures of the bridge during the Dark Ages, which went on for a very long time. It is known that a wooden bridge existed at the same spot throughout the Saxon period until 1176, when the wooden structure was replaced in stone. Beside the bridge, there were many things that the Saxons reused from the ruins of Roman London, and that was the wall of the city. All cities in the ancient world had a wall, a fortification usually used to protect a city or town from potential aggressors. For Roman London, it was riders from Scotland and Ireland, and later from Germany and Scandinavia. The Roman built a fort in London after Boudicca's defeat, a queen of the British Celtic Iceni tribe who led an uprising against the conquering forces of the Roman Empire in AD 60 or 61. 15 years after the defeat of Boudicca, the upgrading of London, the city experienced huge levels of investment from the empire, included a large forum, a public baths complex and new temples. So rapid was the city growth that in about AD 75, the Roman authorities appear to have decided to relocate London Fort. By about 120 AD, a new fort had been built at the northwestern edge of the city, in now what it is now Cripplegate. A Roman fort suggests that the Roman chose London as a new British political headquarters after the Boudicca revolt in the mid-1st century AD. In around the year AD 200, Londinium had become such an important city that they decided to surround it with a protective wall, and later it would be used to protect London from the raiders in the British Isles and continental Europe when the Roman Empire became unstable, making it easy prey. The wall was built after 150 years after the founding of London. It stretched for 2 miles. In the 4th century, the Romans strengthened the defence with towers on each eastern section of the wall. There are still many fragments of the Roman wall left. The fragment which we'll be studying is the London Wall car park. This is one of the most impressive surviving sections of London former city wall because it is located under a car park. If you look at the photo, you will notice several layers of red tiles. This shows the Romans built it because only the Romans used these red tiles. The wall encircled Roman London. It continued to be added on by the Romans until at least the end of the 4th century, making it among the last major building project undertaken by the Romans. It was the largest construction project carried out in Britain alongside the road network and the Hadrian Wall. After the Romans abandoned Britain, the wall remained in active use as a fortification for more than another 1,000 years. During the Saxons period, there were no major improvement to the wall until the Normans came. Recognizing its strength and importance, rebuilt and heightened large sections of it and added more gates to allow ingress and egress through its mighty bulk, and this pattern of heightening and repairing continued. Between the 12th and 17th century until the late 17th century onwards, London began to expand beyond the corset of the old wall, and a period of peace meant that London no longer needed the wall to defend itself. It served a form of basis of protection of the town far into medieval period, and was also a key factor determining the shape of both Roman and medieval London. Bit by bit, the wall began to disappear, and by the 19th century, very little of it remained. One of the main aspects why Roman London was important was the location next to the River Thames, which allowed seagoing ships to unload their freight. On the St. Magnus the Martyr church, there is a small plaque attached to a timber that declares it a segment of an old Roman wharf that dates from 75 AD. Wharf is a man-made landing place for ships on a shore or a riverbank. The bulk of the Roman port was quickly rebuilt after the Boudicca revolt, when the waterfront was extended with rocks to permit a sturdy wharf to be built to the shore. The port was built in 4 sections, starting upstream of the London Bridge and working down towards the Walled Brook at the centre of Londinium. The port continued into the 3rd century. Scraps of armour, leather straps, and under-building timbers suggest that the site was constructed by city troops. Major imports included olive oil, wine, and tin. Only 2 large warehouses are known, implying that Londinium functioned as a bustling trade centre. The Roman ports became an important trading centre, continuing to expand before decline set during the 400s. Roman London, just like almost all Roman towns, had a fort, especially when the town is located in remote area of the empire. All forts was made of timber or stone that were intended to house troops. They were always linked by the Roman road system, which was part of the network of control. The first known fort to be built in Roman London, was AD 120. But there are some recent finds that suggest there were defensive work which date back from AD 63 and cover almost 4 hectares of land close to the Thames and London Bridge. The Roman fort of Londinium, the one that was built around AD 120, was in the northwest of the main population settlement. It covered 12 acres in size, 200 metres along each length. As Londinium grew, the fort was later absorbed into the wall that surrounded the city. The fort could house up to 1,000 men. However, a century later, the site was decommissioned and later dismantled, as the southern edge of Britannia had no longer posed a threat. Today, the fort's northern and western edge remains visible. Nothing lasts forever. The Romans stayed in Britain for 367 years. By the early 5th century, the Roman Empire could no longer defend itself against either internal rebellion or external threat posed by the Germanic tribes expanding into Western Europe. In the year 409 AD, Rome called the legions from Britain to protect Rome from the so-called barbarian tribes. At the same time, all of the Roman settlers that inhabited Britain, which included London, left Britain in mass, as they fear the Germanic tribes will overrun the island, and they were right, as the Saxons, Angles, Jutes invaded Britain. After, when the Roman abandoned Britain, by the end of the 6th century, London area was formed part of a kingdom of East Saxons, while the old Roman city lying within the crumbling walls remained empty. Britain was just one of many Roman provinces in the empire, and there are still so many more stories to tell. I hope this shine a new light of how you view London. Thank you.